Natalie and Monica here to talk about cell phones in the classrooms. Hey, Monica, do you remember that time up in Davis School District where they had a school safety assembly and the students were told they were not allowed to have their cell phones out and they didn't want anything recorded, and they had the authorities running around the gym telling the students to put their phones away, no phones?
It makes you wonder why they didn't want anything recorded. Maybe it's because the kids would have recorded something that looked like this teacher in Alpine School District who went on this total meltdown and rant about how the kids' parents were stupid, Donald Trump was stupid, the kids needed to be vaccinated, they needed to be on board with the LGBTQ agenda. It was kind of a mess.
Oh, it's such a mess. It went viral nationwide, even on the Tucker Carlson show and Fox News National. There's also that time in Nebo School District, the kids were given a list of talking prompts to get to know their neighbor, including asking them what their pronouns were and a world problem they would like to help solve. Because of a student's cell phone, it captured that teachers had found a clever way around not asking students for their pronoun, but still getting kids to reveal their pronouns and what kind of activism they want to be involved in.
Right. And if it weren't for another student's cell phone, we wouldn't have known about kids being asked to eat bugs down in a Nebo school district and having to write an essay on there being only one right answer about, whether we should eat bugs. And the right answer was, yes, we have to all eat bugs. It was really insane. And if we didn't have that video from the student, uh, we wouldn't have known.
Right. And I can't count how many times I've received messages or pictures or audio recordings from parents concerned about what their child was being exposed to or taught in the schools, that parents would have had no idea had it not been for their child having a cell phone and being able to actually capture what was happening. Instead, anytime something's happened where they didn't have that actual evidence, it becomes he said, she said, the student against the teacher or the administrator, and it's always the student that isn't believed. Now we have evidence that these things are happening, and we wouldn't know half of what we know today had it not been for cell phones in the classrooms.
We already have Utah schools that have come out with different policies to regulate the use of phones in schools, but
suddenly we're seeing this big shift to not just regulating cell phones, which we've seen happen on and off throughout the past decade plus, but this move to create a statewide ban on the use of cell phones in schools.
But it also doesn't make sense, because in the last year or two, we've had legislation that has been passed to stop critical race theory in the classrooms and supposedly stop diversity, equity, and inclusion practices and policies and pedagogies in the classroom. So you would think lawmakers would want students exposing if those things are happening, since they've now supposedly made them illegal, which is arguable. I would like for a legislator to explain why they say we want this stuff gone, but we also don't want kids exposing it if it's still there.
if the small screens are a problem, well, the big screens are also a problem. In our state legislature, you don't see any of them putting forth any sort of legislation to get rid of the Chromebooks, which are ubiquitous in our schools. Every kid is issued a Chromebook. So they take away the small screens, they leave the big screens. The kids still have access to the big bad internet. It's still there. They have to, go to YouTube. They have to go to many outside websites in order to do their homework. How are you protecting kids? The cell phones are the parents' responsibility. They're not the school's responsibility. That's the parents' property, most likely. It's their responsibility. But instead, you have the legislature who are treating it as if it was their responsibility
And their property,
and their property.
which it's not. the state has jurisdiction over its property, and that's why they want the kids on the Chromebooks, because they own the data that Chromebook collects on the student. Though the camera on this Chromebook can surveil the student every time the student's on there. You've got the algorithms that are programmed into the ed tech that also control the student and surveil them and collect all kinds of data, discover where the students are, what they're looking up, the websites they're going to, the conversations they're having with their friends or their teachers. All of this is what the state wants so that they can track everything about the student. If a cell phone is there and kids are doing something off on the side on their cell phone, the state can't track that. And the state wants to be able to track everything, especially the things that would add to the social and emotional profile of the student, which is where schools are going. They want that soft, subjective data on the student that's hard to get if the student's not doing everything on the state issued device.
We had back in 2023, there was a bill run by Trevor Lee to do the same thing, prohibit the use of cell phones in schools.
This was at the behest of the governor, who
Yeah.
asked him to run it.
Yeah, the governor had asked him to run it, so he ran it. There was some pushback. You can see the Salt Lake Trib headline here: Utah won't ban cell phones in classrooms. Here's why, and he gives a few examples of the opposition. But the most interesting part of the opposition, I thought, came from Representative Kara Birkeland, who we don't always see eye to eye with, but she's correct on this. She says, as a parent, she takes responsibility for her children's cell phone use. And then this is a quote from her: I feel like this is the heavy hand of government in a way that it's not meant to be, end quote. And then Birkeland explained that it wouldn't be a good precedent to make a law that couldn't be totally enforced. And we can see that if we go look at the text of the bill. Like, there's no enforcement in this bill. It talks about giving money to the schools to the tune of like $4.8 million to
Right, so they're
help,
incentivizing it.
to incentivize the cell phone ban, to give them, pouches, or so they can purchase pouches or containers, receptacles to hold the phones, during class. But this bill just basically makes it illegal, right? It says right here in lines 51 and 52, except as provided for some exceptions, a student may not use a student's cell phone, smartwatch, or emerging technology at a school during the school day. They're making phone use essentially illegal. It's like a criminal act almost for a student to use his or her cell phone. It's not in criminal code, but it would be unlawful if this bill were to pass. That seems to be like taking this a step too far when schools are already free to set policies to regulate the use of student cell phones.
Right. So my question is, if the bill 2 years ago or in 2023 failed so spectacularly and went nowhere, didn't even get out of the education committee, why are they bringing it back now and saying that lawmakers are saying we need this, when in 2023 they all voted against it? What's changed in that short amount of time?
Well, I think they're tired of having what's exposed in the classroom make them look bad, because we have legislators who are now going about saying, oh, we passed a bill, DEI is gone. It's just like you mentioned. We have a law that says they shouldn't be asking about pronouns, et cetera, but we know it's happening. And when these things get exposed time and time again, it also exposes the problems we have with laws that don't do anything. Like, the bad stuff is all still happening. It hasn't gone anywhere.
Right. And they don't want to look like their bill didn't do anything when they passed a bill.
Right.
So is this going to be just another bill like that looks like it's doing something but doesn't actually do anything? Well, you already said it doesn't have any enforcement mechanisms in it, no penalty, except for that it leaves it wide open. So the district could create their own penalties, which could be as draconian or as lenient as they want it to be. I mean, to me, it looks like this is a way for, it says it's a prohibition, and yet it also allows districts to write their own policies to make exceptions where they want, and the state board to create a model policy. So it looks like they will be able to apply the law not equally, but selectively and subjectively. And that's not good. If it's going to be selective and subjective, why are we putting it into Utah code? Unless it's to give unless the legislature is trying to give more ammunition to the districts to intimidate students into doing whatever the district asks them to do.
Is this code that can be weaponized against certain people for exposing, for being whistleblowers? They certainly don't want people recording what's happening in the classrooms, and they want to make it look as if they're doing something. Hey, we're preserving kids' mental health. We're making it so they'll be more sociable, etc. But then you take away again the little screen and you sit them right down in front of a big screen.
Right. And if you really cared about their mental and emotional well-being, the schools wouldn't be allowing all of these woke ideologies to be taught that traumatize the child and make them need mental health services, which the schools are building up right now. They're not diminishing them. They wouldn't be allowing for pornographic books or soft porn or LGBTQ kind of literature in the schools that confuse kids and create more mental and emotional problems. So there are a lot of double messages here that are inconsistent. So I just want to say, which one is it? Plus, if they're not going to get away, like you said, they're not going to get rid of the big screen, the Chromebooks, because the direction that education is going depends on the tech. Everything is geared towards the tech. The literature for years has said that screen time is bad for kids, bad for their emotional and mental well-being. And yet they're changing that narrative. They're burying that research and saying, oh no, tech is fine. It's just how it's used and what they're doing on it. So as long as it's good tech and it's, educational, then it's fine. It doesn't matter how much time they're on it. Our digital literacy standards had language in it that said living life online, helping students to live life online. You're like, if that doesn't tell you the direction they're heading in, I don't know what does.
Parents, this is your responsibility. This is not the state's responsibility to regulate your personal possessions and the use of those personal possessions. It's not like you're sending the kid to school with drugs. It's not like you're sending the kids to school with a weapon. And you as a parent have the right to decide what kind of phone you send your kid to school with. If it's a smartphone, if it's a dumb phone, whatever. If you want your kid exposed to a smartphone, all the time, I guess you take the risks that come with that. But, there are parental controls you can put on a phone to cripple its features and its apps. So, that should be up to me as a parent to decide what I do with my child. I know with my own kid, I gave her a dumb phone specifically for these reasons. It's been wonderful, but she can still get in touch with me if she needs to get in touch with me. And that's what I like about it. But at the end of the day, that's your job as a parent. The state should regulate the state. The state should start with itself and say, hey, if screen time is bad for kids, let's look at the Chromebook use. Let's dial that back a billion notches. We don't need to have the kids in front of the screens all the time. If parents need to realize something, it's now is the time to push back. Now is the time to push back. We don't need legislation. If your district is being very strict about no cell phone use under any circumstances except those which the district carves out,
should be a red flag.
It should be a red flag. What are they hiding? Right?
Right. Parents have to kind of take a hard look at themselves and say, am I being a courageous parent? Am I able to put down my foot and actually, put some boundaries and parameters on what my child can do? And if I handed them the phone, then as a parent, I have to take responsibility for the fact that my child is now addicted to that phone that I gave them. And I have to find a way to rein that back in if it's become a problem. And And that's what it's going to take. I fear that too many parents are going to be happy about this bill because it allows them to point to the legislature and use that to say that their child now has to listen to them. See, the state says you can't have it at school, so you can't have it at school, and now the state's done the dirty work for the parent because that the parent was afraid to do or lacked the gumption to enforce with their own child. And so that's a dangerous position because that's what the state wants. The state wants to make those decisions for the parents, and take those rights away, that power away from the parents. But that it sets a, like Senator or Representative Birkeland said, it sets a dangerous precedence because once as parents we cede that role to the state, to force our children to do what we as parents should be monitoring and controlling, as necessary for what's best for our child, then who knows what the state's going to do next, um, in its role as the new nanny state. Not only telling your child what to do, but they will next be telling the parent what to do and potentially criminalizing the parent for actually being a parent, in a way that the state doesn't agree with. So all
Right.
of these things, are very put us in a very precarious place that if we don't take back our role as parents and say this child is my responsibility and I will parent the way I see fit and I don't need the state to tell me how to parent.
That's our prerogative as parents. But unfortunately, I agree with you. I feel like we're going to have some people who will embrace this and instead of just assuming the responsibility they need to assume, and anything that you any responsibility authority you see to the state, you just won't get back again. It's gone. It's like you said, it's a slippery slope.
Yes, it is. So anyway, thanks for joining us on Cell Phones in the Classroom, and we'll see you next time.